What's your most shocking, never meet your heroes moment? Brent Spiner broke my heart, and John Delancey. Star Trek TNG was our favorite show to watch together. Data was my favorite character and Q was hers. Mom passed away suddenly. That same year I got the opportunity to meet them both at a convention, paid for a photo op and autograph each with them. Just teared up waiting in line from grief and wishing I could be having this moment with my mom. Not a squealing fab girl crying, I was just composed. I just couldn't stop the tears. I was wiping my tears when I stepped up to Mr. Spiner, and they just wouldn't stop falling. I apologized to him and I told him I wished my mom was here to meet him too. He sighed, rolled his eyes and asked if I could pull myself together to take the picture. Now, I know he doesn't owe me anything, but dang, that stung. It felt like he didn't see me as a person. So I got my picture and I moved on to Mr. Delancey, still trying to get the tears under control. Mr. Delancey greeted me with a hug and asked if I was okay. I explained Mom had passed, and he was her favorite character on the show, and I wished like heck she was here to meet him. He asked if I had a picture of her on my iPhone, and said pull up my favorite one of her so she could be in the picture with us. The autograph he wrote was, "Remember, Mom is waiting for you in the stars." He took maybe 2 more minutes than Brent to treat me like a whole person. Oh my gosh, I was worried. I thought the opening statement was that they both broke your heart. But it's always nice when that person takes that, not even necessarily extra time. She said it was like 2 minutes, but I think you can see it in someone's eyes when they look at you like a person and not just a fan of this sort of thing that was made. Next story. Secondhand story, but my brother-in-law won a contest to hang out with David Lee Roth and be his assistant for a day, around the time he had left Van Halen and put out his first solo album. He was pretty excited about it. He said Roth talked non-stop about the stupidest things, and by the end of the day, he couldn't wait to get away from him. Next story. At 19, I went to meet the plastic surgeon that saved my eye, my face, and my life as a 3-year-old dog attack victim. He stared at my breast the entire encounter, and after I had told him who I was and how grateful I was, he asked if I had also had my breasts done. Next story. Lou Ferrigno was an a-hole in person. Wish I never met the guy. Waited in line to have him sign something of mine for $80. He literally scooped the item up and then threw it back down, all while making comments like, "Another one of these?" and seemed very annoyed by me paying for an autograph. I will never understand that situation. If you didn't want to sign stuff, why show up at the convention? I also paid $80 for you. You could have at least been nice. Didn't even give me the time of day. Immediately regretted it. I'm always baffled by that too. There's a lot of people that go to these conventions, and sure, you're seeing hundreds, maybe thousands of people, but you're paid to be there, and they're paying to see you. I can think of harder ways to spend a Saturday. I've luckily never been on the other side of this fence. I did get an autograph from Duke Johnson, one of the Cleveland Browns running backs. And not only did he give it to me for free, he was taking time to actually ask people how their day was and what they were doing and what's going on. It was my only autograph convention experience, and I can't speak more highly of it. Next story. I was there when SpaceX successfully recovered/landed the 2 Falcon Heavy boosters for the first time. It was an amazing experience, a huge event, tons of people, lots of cameras, space celebs, guest speakers, whole shebang. Extremely cool thing to witness. So I'm loitering near some guy with a fancy camera on a tripod, as a lot of folks had, and suddenly he stands up straight, looking upset and says dumbfounded, "I might have to tell someone what I just saw. I'm sorry. Buzz Aldrin is right now clipping his fingernails on a balcony above the crowd." And I was like, "I beg your finest pardon?" And he shows me and a few other folks who heard him his footage, and sure enough, there's Buzz effing Aldrin, clear as crystal, standing alone on a balcony above where people were eating food and generally mingling, leaning over the railing and just clipping his fingernails directly all over these people. So I didn't meet him, I suppose. And I knew my space history and that of all of them, Buzz could absolutely be a bit much. But man, really, dude? Really? I've never gotten over it. Next story. My uncle and his buddy were drunk at the Buick Open and followed by Fred Couples to each hole, yelling and begging for an autograph whenever he wasn't golfing. Around the 8th green, my uncle yells, "Freddie, baby!" And Fred Couples walks over and says he'll sign something if they shut up and let him golf. All my uncle has is a $20 bill, so he hands it to Fred. Fred scribbles, they shut up. Fred has a good rest of the match. Uncle is at the bar at the country club later, bragging and laughing about it. The bartender asks to see the signature. Uncle hands him the 20. It doesn't say Fred Couples, it says F you. My uncle still framed it and hung it up in his house. Also, my uncle is an obnoxious piece of crap, okay? Given the chance to shake Fred Couples' hand for this act, I'd also gladly do it. Next story. My husband had a very high-profile job that allowed us to interact with celebrities on the regular. The rudest, ungrateful, and most bored were Jake Gyllenhaal, Joan Collins, Jennifer Lopez. The nicest, most gracious kind were Octavia Spencer, Melissa McCarthy, Bradley Cooper, George Clooney, Bob Newhart, Renee Zellweger, and Betty Davis. I guess that sort of checks out. I have a buddy who works with celebrities, and he says the nicest guy he ever meets, and he meets a lot of them, but I'm just going to say one, is Jason Earls, I believe is his name, the guy from Hannah Montana. Says he's the nicest, most generous, genuine, kind, absolutely down-to-earth guy you'll ever meet, especially as a celebrity. And I think that's pretty high praise. Now, I've never met the guy, but I guess we're all just going to have to take my friend's word for it. I hope he's not lying. Next story. I'm a decades-long con rat. Oh, I have stories. But this one stands out as amongst the absolute worst, and I was just a bystander. Setting, AggieCon, the Texas A&M Campus Geek Fest, circa 1995. John Byrne was the lead celeb, had a booth. I was standing at an adjacent table talking to a dealer. Dad and his little kid approached Byrne. Kid had some drawings of his own to show off and some X-Men comics to get signed. Kid was nervous as heck, but Dad encouraged him and was gentle and sweet. Byrne takes one look at the drawings and loudly, so the entire conference room could hear, proclaimed how much the drawings sucked. And then he complained that he was sick of X-Men and did big, scrawling signatures across the kid's comics and essentially ruined them. Kid was terrified and shrank. Dad was mad and snatched the kid away in silent fury. Byrne leaned back, put his hands behind his head and smirked like Alfred E. Newman just swallowed a canary. The entire room stared daggers. I called him an a-hole, and he laughed. Never read another book with him attached again. Next story. I was this huge fanatic for this man known for his superpower of incredible strength. I wanted to be his sidekick. I was also trying to help him from this man trying to bomb a building. I only wanted to help, but he rejected me. It tore me apart, but I learned an important lesson. You can't count on anyone, especially your heroes. I can fly! Can you fly? Fly home, buddy. I work alone. Next story. Grew up watching King of Queens because my parents loved it. Would always do my homework while my dad watched it after school, or would sit and watch it with my mom at night if they were playing it. Fast forward to 17, 18. I was valeting one day. Kevin James pulls up, cuts the line of, I want to say at least 30 cars, maybe more. My manager went up to him and said, "You can't do that. Go to the back of the line." He throws the biggest hissy fit. "Do you know who I am? I promise I will get you fired and ruin this company." My manager stood his ground. He cursed my manager out, peeled out, kicking dirt up to wait at the end of the line, and I watched the whole thing from my spot where I was waiting for cars so I could park them. I will give it to him that when he did leave, he tipped us $150 and apologized. But I mean, he showed his true colors there, and it broke my inner child's heart. Next story. I never had one like that. When I met Teller after a show in Vegas, told him that his performance of Roses was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. He told me that he was honored to hear that. One of my most favorite authors followed me online after I apparently made him snort laugh with a comment. Chuck Yeager followed me online too, just because he liked something I responded to. Sometimes heroes are exactly who you want them to be. I can be your hero, baby. It's unrelated to that story, I know, but it's the only song looping through my head as we read these stories. Next story. Keith Hernandez. Met him when I was 18. He signed some things for me, was very nice, and talked baseball with me. Great experience. Met him again at age 47 a year ago. This time it was a paid experience. I paid for an autograph and inscription. He didn't want to sign the card or write the inscription. He was an a-hole. He did it because his handlers reminded him that's how he gets paid. It's like he was a totally different person. Next story. Met Rudy Giuliani at a military function. This was before his craziness with Trump. Guy was America's mayor after 9/11. Talked with him briefly until I saw him staring at my niece's chest. Not a glance, I mean staring. She was like 22 at the time. Got her the heck out of there. Effin' perv. Next story. I had backstage passes to Echo and the Bunnymen back in the 80s. My girlfriend and I were talking to Ian McCulloch, and he seemed pretty cool. He asked if I wanted to go out drinking, and we of course said yes. The remainder of the evening was him hitting on my girlfriend so much that it made everyone very uncomfortable. He was a drunk a-hole. I seen him interact with people at the bar, and it was hilarious too. He asked everybody if they had drugs or he hit on them. A lot of the women in the bar knew that he was married and had a new child. He got told to F off more than I have seen in my whole life. We ended up leaving the bar and not even saying goodbye because he was such a jerk. Next story. Tom Savini. I have a Day of the Dead poster. I had George Romero autographed and brought it to get him to sign. As a big fan of old school practical effects, I tried to compliment him on his works as he signed it, and he just seemed so upset that I wasn't even attempting to talk to him. But George Romero was awesome, super friendly and happy to talk to, and shook my hand and was all smiles to hear Day of the Dead was one of my favorite zombie movies. Next story. Bob Dylan came out of a thrift shop in Kalamazoo as I was walking down the sidewalk. This was late 90s. He was playing a show downtown that night which I knew about but couldn't attend. Or I probably wouldn't have realized who it was. Just said, "Love you, Bob," as we were about to pass each other. He stopped and looked at me and said, "Do you know me?" I stammered something like, no, but I love your songs." He nodded and said, "I thought you thought I was someone else," and then kept walking. It was kind of perfect, in contrast to the theme of this post and comment section. Next story. I had the misfortune of knowing a fair amount about retired NFL legend John Elway through multiple means. He is a total piece of garbage. He beat his ex-wife just about every loss. He would get drunk, and was a mean drunk at that. The Broncos would lose a game and we'd say, his wife better stay in a hotel after that one. His son Jack pushed his ex-girlfriend out of a moving car as well, and we all know dang well that behavior was learned from his father. He hired a prominent criminal defense lawyer in Denver who is the guy you hire when you get in some deep crap. And people loved him because he threw a ball well in the NFL. Next story. My sister, when she was a little tween, was super into Panic at the Disco. Well, who should she see while leaving hospital but Brendon Urie? They were playing close to the hospital and she couldn't get tickets since she was sick, but she caught a glimpse of him while waiting at the junction. A dream come true. She called out to him from the window, just wanting a wave. He pretended not to hear her, and the man he was with gestured to my sister, alerting him to the fact. He shook his head and still blanked her, and when he reached the corner he glanced back and caught sight of her crumpled and despondent face, and they both had a very good laugh at her. I mean, he's a total turd anyway, but this was before that was common knowledge. I chime in with a haven't you people ever heard of waving to a small child? Come on, dude, come on. Have some composure. Where's your posture? Oh, no. Next story. Not me, but my grandpa. He took all my aunts and uncles when they were little kids to go see John Wayne give a speech at the Golden Spike National Historic Site back in the 70s. The Duke was drunk as a skunk and rambled incoherently. I heard a similar story about Hunter Thompson from a college professor when Thompson was invited to come do a Q&A at the school back in the 80s. My grandpa also met Steve Martin when they were staying at the same Detroit hotel way back in the 60s. He had the room next door and could hear Martin working on his stand-up routine through the wall. They were neighbors for about a week, and it got to the point that they started greeting one another in the hall, and even shared a table at breakfast. Martin was polite and courteous to everyone, according to Grandpa. Oh, that makes me feel so good. This is the first time we've reached one of my heroes, dude. I love Steve Martin. So glad to hear that he's a good guy, man. That just makes me happy. Next story. My grandma loved the Kansas City Royals in the 70s. So much so that she got a job at the stadium in the 80s when she didn't need to work. She just wanted to be there. One day, she was carrying a box down a hallway and George Brett was walking with a few of his teammates down the same hall in the other direction. He walked right up to her and stood in front of her to where she couldn't easily walk around and said, "You're in my way." She moved over to the wall and they all kept walking down the hall and laughing. She quit shortly after that and didn't watch them again until like 30 years later. Next story. Mark Recchi is a Hall of Fame hockey player from my hometown of Kamloops, BC. For those unfamiliar, he was a big star, put up tons of points, won multiple Stanley Cups, the whole bit. He is easily our favorite son and was named the top Kamloops athlete of the 20th century and has a street named after him. When I was a shy, hockey-loving 13-year-old, he came home to sign autographs. He was extremely rude and dismissive and made fun of me for being nervous and fumbling with the notebook I brought to get his autograph. 25 years later, and it still makes me mad. Next story. I studied genetics at university. Two of the most famous men in the field were James Watson and Francis Crick, who were awarded a 1962 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for elucidating the double helix structure of DNA. And yes, they heavily relied on the research of Rosalind Franklin, who they did not credit. I was more than a bit excited as a freshman to attend a lecture by Watson, and that was enough for me to learn what was widely known in the field. James Watson is a right butthole. He has a long story of making racist, sexist, and discriminatory comments and attempting to justify in as a genetic truth his version of eugenics that features himself as a sort of exemplar of all that is good and right. Next story. Burt Reynolds. I worked at a restaurant in Palm Beach in the early aughts, and he was a friend of the owner. He sat in my section, and I casually commented that Cannonball Run was one of my favorite movies before I took his order. He rolled his eyes and said, "Great," whatever the heck that meant. He was rude to not only me, but every employee that was even slightly near his table. Total douchebag, and even worse tipper. Next story. In the early aughts, I used to work in the special events department of a New England-based independent bookstore that's known for hosting authors, some of whom were also pop culture figures such as celebrities, athletes, radio personalities, etc. One time, Tina Louise, who was arguably best known for playing Ginger in the 60s sitcom Gilligan's Island, did a meet and greet at the store because she had written a children's book. In my capacity as the author wrangler for the event, I was standing close by when an elderly gentleman approached the table where Tina, presumably in her 70s at the time, was sitting. The man claimed that Tina had been his date at a high school prom and brought photos of the two of them in their prom finery. Not only did Tina refuse to look at the photos, or the gentleman himself, she then mumbled something about not living in the past. The poor guy looked utterly dejected. If Tina had been his hero up to that point, I suspect she no longer was following that encounter. Next story. My friend had one with Jack White. His band opened for him like 10 or so years ago. When equipment was being loaded in for the show, my friend stepped out for a cigarette by the loading dock, and Jack White saw him standing around smoking and started yelling at him to get off his butt and move equipment. When he said he was in the opening band, Jack had kind of an reaction and asked if he would give his crew a hand since he wasn't busy. My friend was pretty disgusted that he would talk to his road crew like that. Next story. Met Hilary Swank. I was her Uber driver. We were driving for about an hour, and halfway through deep LA traffic on their way to see Bruce Springsteen's show, who happens to be their friend, that they explained, she and her significant other were a bit intoxicated and in good spirits. It was funny because my brakes were making a loud scratching noise. They were ready to be replaced, so I asked what they wanted to listen to in order to hide the noise. Obviously, she picked Springsteen, and she was a fun drunk. Every other Springsteen song, she would go, "Oh, this one's my favorite." Next story. A friend of mine ran into Keanu Reeves while he was taking a break just outside a movie set. Said he was happy to talk to them, was super down to earth, and was genuinely interested in talking with them, not just at them. I know this isn't the question, but in a thread like this, I just love Keanu for what a great contrast he is to all these jerks. Does anybody even have a bad story of Keanu? For as long as he's been in the industry, no matter where you hear a story from and what medium and what person, it's all, this guy's great, he's down to earth, he's kind, he's generous, he's patient. I mean, barring you don't touch his puppy, but outside of that, he's a great guy, and you love to see it. Next story. Meeting one of my favorite authors and realizing they were rude, dismissive, and honestly, kind of boring. All the magic I felt in their books completely vanished in real life. Made me appreciate their work even more, just separate from the person. Next story. When I was about 6 years old, I met the San Diego Chicken at a baseball game. I stopped him for a high five, not even to take a picture or anything. He says, "Get out of my way, you little wiener," and ruined the game for me, and gave me a strong distrust of chickens. Next story. I met one of my favorite authors. We had a nice long chat and actually talked about never meeting your heroes because he'd recently had dinner with Lou Reed and was delighted that he was nice and not how he comes across in interviews. For years, I would hold him up as a shining example of how this idiom wasn't always true. Then a whole bunch of allegations came out about him. Next story. Cal Ripken Jr. single-handedly ruined baseball for me. I was a kid, but I'm pretty sure I stopped watching baseball altogether after the experience. I was like 8, maybe 9, and had saved up enough money to go watch him play the Brewers. We got there early, I ran down to the fence by the clubhouse, and there were 3 people there. 2 other people and me. He signed one guy's glove, skipped me completely despite me being right there, then signed the guy's glove on the other side of me, then trotted on back into the dugout. Next story. I work in customer service for a large, well-known financial company. Had Ben Stein on the phone, which I thought was pretty cool. Obscure celebrity to get to meet, and he was a miserable b-hole. By the end of it, though, he was nice to me, and no, I did not get a chance to win Ben Stein's money. Another obscure celebrity from the 90s I met was Mark Summers, and he was as nice in person as he was on TV. Next story. Well, it's pretty pathetic overall, but I was like 12 and ran into a local newscaster at the grocery store, and my 12-year-old boy self was crushing on her because she was a hottie, and I managed to get a, "Whoa, you're her name," and then she bit my head off about leaving people alone and how dare I act like I know who she was. I switched news stations after that. Next story. I had a fan pic with Billy Boyd at a Comic-Con type thing. I told him I was a big fan. He said, "Oh, thank you, I'm doing a concert after, you should come." I said, "Oh, you bet I will." Well, things happened and I couldn't make it. Can't believe I lied to Pippin. I just hope he didn't take it too hard. Oh, that's why they tell heroes, don't meet your biggest fan. Next story. Damme Moynihan was such a delight. I got a map of Edoras signed at C2E2. That Carl Urban had already signed a few years back was also super nice. And he took time to chat with me about the local food and coffee scene in Chicago, as he's a massive foodie. Watch Billy and Dom eat the world, it's so wholesome. And he was incredibly kind, gracious, and normal. Next story. Not a bad story, this is a positive one. I got to meet Sergeant Slaughter at a Comic-Con, and I was at the time a huge G.I. Joe fan, and asked him what it was like to be featured as a celebrity character. He talked with me for several minutes, reminiscing about the cartoon and how he had kids always coming up to him back in the day to ask where Duke and Beachhead and Flint were. Super nice guy. Next story. We worked at a gift shop at the airport, and one day this guy walks in and my coworker says, "Man, you were the spitting image of Jack Nicholson." And he said, "Is that a good thing?" And she said something about him being her favorite actor, and he said, "Well, thank you very much for the compliment," and bought a water and walked out. Then she hears a tap on the window, and it's that man, and he's waving goodbye to her. And as she waves back, he does his famous Jack Nicholson smile, and she lost her mind. Next story. Mike Piazza. Guy was an absolute douche. He wouldn't talk to anyone when a family friend got us field passes for batting practice. He just talked to some woman behind home plate during batting practice the entire time, which was crushing to a bunch of kids. The hilarious thing was that Bobby Valentine was the complete opposite. Told us to come into his office, where his home screensaver on his computer was him screaming in an umpire's face. Gave me and my family 8 minutes of his day while drinking root beers in his office. Al Leiter and John Franco were also absolute class. Saw us walking back and stopped us and signed some balls. Every time I see or even hear Piazza's name, I cringe, because the dude's a piece of crap. but he could swing a baseball bat fairly well even though he juiced. Next story. Used to work at a bottle shop in Melbourne about 15 years back. One of the regulars was absolutely alcohol dependent and had all kinds of stories of famous people he knew and played music with. We just assumed it was all BS. Mentioned to him one night that I was a huge Nick Cave fan. This guy says, "Oh, really? Nick's staying at my house next month. I'll bring him in." A month passes. Nick Cave shows up at my battleship and spends 15 minutes just chatting about anything and everything. Absolute gentleman. Completely not the point of this thread, but it still brings a smile to my face. Next story. Not me, but my mom. My brother had a very small part in the Prince of Persia movie. One of the kids at the beginning doing some free-running malarkey. They had an all-expenses-paid trip to Morocco. They stayed in the same hotels as the bigger stars. At the time, my mom was a mega Ben Kingsley fan and was sat next to him and his wife at an evening meal. Apparently, he was extremely rude to the staff and everyone around him. She never watched another one of his movies. Jake Gyllenhaal, on the other hand, was an absolute diamond and beautiful person inside and out. Uh-oh, we just got a conflicting image, as Jake Gyllenhaal was part of that rude, boring, impatient list that someone had beforehand. But here, he's a diamond, a stud. Also, I don't know if I'm allowed to reference earlier stories in the episode because I don't know if things get edited out. But point is, some people had different experiences. So Jake Gyllenhaal, if he's one of your heroes, okay, we're not out of the fight yet. He might be great. He also might be bad. He also might just be a person, who has good days and bad days. Like I'm sure a lot of celebrities do. I mean, some might have notoriety for actually being a douche, but, at the end of the day, we have no idea what's going on in theirs. Next story. I met a very influential American politician years ago. He was an a-hole. He said, "Get the F out of here, I don't want to meet you." I said, "Well, F you then. Everyone has been lying to you, your makeup looks like crap, and everybody secretly laughs at you behind your back." He whipped around and pointed at me saying, "What country are you from?" he demanded. "Venezuela," I said. "I'll remember that." He squinted at me, then lumbered back into the building. Look, I don't know if this is a popular reference and everybody already knows which politician he's talking about. I have no clue, but I did do a Trump voice just for the sake of practice. Because it needs practice, it needs to get one of the best. And I hate to bother you guys with all these impressions, but if not you, then who? Genuinely though, thank you for your patience and all the kind comments. You guys are the best. I love you. Next story. This is a good story. 13-year-old me heard that my favorite running back, Wilbert Montgomery of the 1980s Philadelphia Eagles, was signing autographs at a local department store. I got in line and waited by myself. I didn't realize that you probably needed something to sign. Duh. I got up to the front, and he was so gracious and kind. He had a stack of photos for situations like this. Signed one for me, shook my hand, and said some nice words. I've never forgotten it. It hangs on my wall. Next story. Not necessarily meeting a hero moment, but the Winchester Mystery House was so disappointing. I had built up the idea that this was this amazingly spooky place since I was 7 and first read about it in a library book. I was obsessed through adolescence and adulthood. Cut to my late 30s, I found myself in San Jose and had to go with my family. It's cool and has an interesting story, but not nearly as ghostly or creepy as I wanted it to be all those years. Next story. Stephen Cosgrove of the Serendipity children's books is a horrible person. He hired me, then viciously berated me on the first day because I suggested things he thought were stupid, and he never paid me. Then I got to meet several of the lead designers on World of Warcraft, and many of them also sucked. One legit kneecapped and deleted my work because I didn't fawn over him. Ken Levine is gross, and I hope I never have to meet him again. Christy Golden is a delight and absolutely lovely though, as is Gail Simone, Felicia Day, Jenny Lawson, and Will Wheaton. Eliza Schlesinger was also very nice. Next story. When I was 16, I worked at a locally owned pet store. We had 2 celebrity encounters while I was working there. First was Robert Vaughn. I didn't know him by name on site, but I recognized him as a celebrity. He wanted to buy kitty litters. I told him about the different models we had, and he was kinda terse and just wanted to buy the best, most expensive one. After I helped him get the 2 litters he picked out, I said, "You look familiar." And he said, "Yeah, movies and TV, kid." Nothing too mean, but he clearly didn't want to talk about his fame. I asked my manager about it after, and she said I handled it perfectly, and he was also totally in the right to not want to talk about his fame if he didn't want to. And I agreed. The next was Joe Pantoliano, and he was so freaking cool, Joey Pants, as he's known by his friends. My manager actually knew him personally and let me know he was coming into the store that day. She let me handle the sale. He wanted dog collars for his Doberman, who was a very friendly dog. He wore this sweet leather cowboy hat, a bold belt buckle, and leather jacket. He had this beautiful rainbow finish foldable knife that he happily showed me. I don't remember any specifics of our conversation, but I remember it being a great time chatting. He was a very sweet and genuine man. And of course, The Matrix was one of my favorite movies at the time, so getting to meet Cypher was awesome. Next story. I met Ozzy Osbourne at his book signing. The line was tremendous, and his people were shuffling the autograph seekers through quickly. It was a sign-and-go kind of thing. Horrible when you look at it. When it was my turn, I gave him the book. He signed it, and I said, "Thank you." And it seemed to startle him a bit because nobody had thanked him. He looked up at me and said, "You're welcome." I said, "I hope you have a lovely day." And as people shuffled me off, I know it's not exactly what OP is looking for, but man, Ozzy rules. Next story. I have an alternate story about one of my heroes. Musician John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats takes time to talk with fans after the shows. No payment required. 21 years ago, I was 8 months pregnant at one of his shows, and the band made sure I had a chair near the front, even though it was standing room only. After the show, he took the time to talk to me about wanting to become a father, but wondering if his own personal trauma would make him a bad one. I assured him that I had heard his lyrics, and I knew he would be a great dad. And I had my own personal trauma as well, and chose to be a mother anyway. At the end of our conversation, he respectfully asked if he could rub my huge belly, and of course I was thrilled about that. My son loves his music. And yes, he has kids. Next story. Positive, and from my dad. Outside of Vancouver at a gas station, assuming heading to the airport, there was a black limo. The window was down, and my dad swore it was Robin Williams. He ran over, and Robin gave him a big smile and shook his hand. I miss that guy. Next story. The Bad. I met Brandon Sanderson at a convention. Dude was a massive a-hole and constantly interrupted and talked over women, specifically at the panels. Disappointed was an understatement. I wish this was a one-off thing, but after Comic-Con appearances and a Fan Expo panel, which there was much of the same behavior, I don't know if I can say he was just having a bad day. The good. I met Alice Cooper, Vincent Furnier, in a dive bar in Toronto. Dude was lovely. Never asked for his autograph because holy crap, Alice Cooper. Considering he was playing in Toronto, I went to see Motley Crue's final tour. I honestly thought it was an awesome cosplay. Until a dude in a suit called him Mr. Furnier. Next story. Actually, so many of the famous people I've met have been really nice. I met a bunch of my favorite bands when I was a teenager, and they were all very nice to me. I'm talking Foo Fighters, Sonic Youth, Melvins, Pavement, etc. Then I did some screen work later on, and I met a bunch of people I never expected to see in real life. I met Natalie Portman when we were both on Letterman together. She seemed like a very nice person. I was in a movie later with her and Dustin Hoffman. I had an awkward interaction on set with him, but I blame myself for my inability to make decent small talk. Mila Kunis was actually one of the nicest ones I ever met. I didn't recognize her at first as I was in the makeup trailer, and she didn't have any makeup on, and I was getting my makeup done, so I wasn't fully paying attention. After a few minutes of chatting, it was impossible to not recognize her voice, and I suddenly realized she was very friendly on set, Max Payne, and joked with me throughout the day as I was dressed as a bloody dead body in one of the scenes. Anyway, I guess I'm very lucky because no celebrity I ever met really seemed like a jerk to me. Obviously, there are no shortages of jerkheads out there, but they aren't all like that. Who's this guy? Just on Letterman with Natalie Portman hanging out with Dustin Hoffman, Mila Kunis, all of them? This guy might be the celebrity. We gotta meet him. Hopefully we're not let down, but we gotta. Next story. I met Pete Best of the Beatles at some event for the new Beatle. This has to be the 1999 or so. Anyway, he was celeb. People lined up with pictures and photos of the Beatles with a lot of Ringo. I had secondhand embarrassment for him. Well, my dad and I got to meet him, and his handlers were very gruff and said only one autograph per person. Pete threw his hands up because my dad and I brought his book he wrote and maybe 4 or 5 pictures with him actually in them. He shook my dad and I hand, and that was about it. But he took a few minutes for us, and he really was terrific. Next story. Late to the party, but my hero was Jean-Claude Van Damme. When I was a kid, he was the best of the action stars, and I wanted to be just like him. Fast forward almost 30 years, 2007-ish, and I was walking into a store in the west end of Vancouver. When I saw him, he was walking with a beautiful, well-endowed woman, and I asked him if he was Jean-Claude Van Damme. I was absolutely starstruck, and he was super happy to stop and chat. I noticed he and his date were very clearly super high on some drugs, and he was very chatty, but super nice and engaging, but it was very disappointing to see his jaw rattling back and forth. I ended up inching away while he was still talking. I hope he got it together. Next story. Not a hero, but I love the show Law & Order SVU. Years ago, I was working at a restaurant in Manhattan, and actor B.D. Wong, he plays the FBI psychiatrist, reacted extremely bizarrely when I made a little joke. The restaurant was known for their breakfasts, and he came in multiple days in a row for breakfast, like 5+ days, which was normal because we had regulars. One time he came to the hostess stand, and I greeted him and his party while smiling and said, "Can't stay away, can you?" I didn't yell it, say it sarcastically, or fangirl over him, nothing. He then glared at me, and loudly and coldly said, "Yes, I do come here every day. So what? Do you have a problem with that?" I was so shocked, I just mumbled an apology and sat them. The next day, I get called into the manager's office. Apparently, B.D. Wong had called the restaurant to complain about my inappropriate behavior. Every time he came in after that, I would have a different staff member seat him. I truly have no idea why he reacted like that. Nice celebs I met while living in New York City: Heath Ledger, Michelle Williams, Kira Sedgwick, RuPaul, Matthew Modine, Dennis Leary, and Willem Dafoe. Next story. Not really my heroes, but going back to my 10-year class reunion and meeting my old teachers. Some of them were cool and friendly and bright, brought back some great memories, but many I could see for the person they were. Be it weak, controlling, immature, weird. As a kid, you pretty much find teachers a similar amount of respect by default, but as an adult, it's easier to judge them on their merit. Next story. I used to live in Charleston. I can't really remember where it was, but I ran into Bill Murray and said, "Oh, hey Bill." He just kind of looked at me and walked away with a nasty look on his face. It wasn't terrible, especially compared to some of the stuff in this thread, but it still left a negative impression. Later, I shared this story with a buddy of mine who works in F&B, and he said, "Oh yeah, he was a jerk to me when I was serving him, so apparently I'm not alone." Next story. Chris Jericho came into the bar I was working at in San Jose about 15 years ago. Dude was a complete douche. Was pretty lewd with my waitress to the point where I swapped them out for a bouncer for his table. But apparently medium-sized guy has short guy syndrome and tried fronting off with the bouncer. We ultimately started slow cutting him. His last few drinks were basically just water and mixer. Do you know what happens to people who cut Chris Jericho off at the bar? Huh? Do you know what happens, Reddit? Do you? You just made the list! Next story. I helped put on a live Q&A event at my university featuring Dr. Ruth Westheimer. I was so excited as she was a hero of mine and I really respect her work. She was the rudest person I've ever met in my life. She yelled at multiple people, like screamed at them, not just a raised voice, that we weren't getting her questions to answer fast enough or that they were useless questions all students submitted ahead of time and shared with her beforehand, or that we were doing things wrong overall. She also answered a very shy queer kid asking about how to come out to their family by telling the kid to just shut up about it and not tell their family anything. One of the faculty at the event had to jump in to provide a better answer to the student because they started to cry. It completely broke my image of her and tainted her message for me going forward. Next story. A nice little twist on the question. Roddy Piper was out with a friend of his when a kid walked up and asked for an autograph. Piper growled at the kid and told him to get lost. After the kid walked away, Piper's friend asked why he would do something like that to a kid who was obviously a big fan. Piper told him that if he had given the kid an autograph, the kid would have walked away with a piece of paper that would inevitably get lost. Instead, he had a story he would be telling for the rest of his life. I don't remember who the friend was, but he wrote about the incident after Piper died. I don't even mean to be devil's advocate here, but more like devil's lawyer, devil's interviewer? Was this during the age of wrestling? I'm not a great historian of it, but was this at the time where heels actually had to continue to be their angry persona outside of the ring? If so, I could get it, but it would be really weird if he was the babyface guy and still told the kid to get lost. I don't know. I'm glad they wrote a book about it, but I would like to hear the kid's perspective on whether he would have liked that story or, a nice meeting. Next story. This isn't my story, but a guy I worked with who had ran an LA theater in the 90s. He was a huge fan of Kevin Costner and saw Dances with Wolves 3 years before he had an interaction with him. Like I said, he was the GM, and it wasn't uncommon for celebrities to come in just to watch their movies or go with family or friends to see whatever. There was a hidden way to take celebrities and avoid fans, but it required going through the projector room of the theater. This was at the time when movie theater projectors had to be ran on film fed into the camera, and sometimes it went to the floor. Costner almost slipped on the film and had a meltdown. My manager went from being a huge fan to, this guy is terrible, within seconds. Bonus story / happy ending, he said Bruce Willis was the nicest to come in, multiple times. Theater employees would run to go get popcorn and snacks and drinks for celebrities, and he said Bruce Willis would always hand a kid a $100 bill after ordering like $10 worth of food and then tell them, keep the change. Next story. Grew up Mormon. My last year at BYU, a kid self-unalived in an extremely public fashion. The university closed that one building for a few hours to clean, but it was business as usual otherwise. The next day, David Bednar, a Mormon Apostle, came to give the school's weekly spiritual address. He spent an hour talking about how obedience to the gospel would bring us happiness. It felt like he was saying, too bad for that kid, he should have been more righteous and he would have lived. At the end of his tone-deaf speech, the university's current president stood up before Bednar, and Bednar literally waited for him to sit down again so he could stand up first, then walk out. By this time, I had had plenty of moments of, I think I should leave this cult. This moment, however, was more of a, how did I ever get into any of this sort of crap kind of moment. Next story. He wasn't my hero, but I sadly admired him, as I was a wrestling fan. But I met a future killer, Chris Benoit. I was however old you are when you're in 4th grade. Grand opening of the WWE store on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. I stood in line for hours to get autographs from Benoit, Trish Stratus, and Val Venus. Trish was a sweetheart. Val was chill. Chris was a cranky jerk, but he did shake my hand. So anyway, I just like telling people I met a killer. One of the saddest stories, not just as a celebrity, but in sports or anything. Oh boy. Anyways, guys, that concludes our stories of shockingly hero-meeting moments. That's not how you say that at all. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. And if you guys have any stories of meeting your heroes that you would like to share, feel free to drop those down below in the comments, because we clearly love reading them and you guys are my heroes and I can't wait to meet you down there. But as always, thanks for hanging out with me and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.